Hello and welcome to the Marketing Dribble podcast with myself, Rob Boyle, and my co-host, Johnny Kenyon. Hiya, Johnny. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks, Rob. How are you?
Not too bad, thank you. I've been playing around with the Chat GPT sort of shop and the new GPTs
Uh,
you can get into. So I'm just waiting for the time that they take over my job, and that'll be the end.
yeah,
So
Rob,
just
no,
playing
no
along with
small talk.
that.
We've got a really, really important guest with a professional studio setup. So, video listeners, check that out. That's pretty good. We do not have time for your small talk, unfortunately, Rob.
No, no,
Um,
never mind.
so I'll just introduce our guest and breeze right on past that. But you can do some at the end, maybe, Rob, if we get time. So, Chris Walker, we've got Chris Walker on the show today. Welcome on.
Guys, really happy to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
So I'm just going to do a little basic intro. I've scraped off the internet, and I'll let you do a much better one. So Chris is the founder of both Passetto, a B2B go-to-market strategy company, and also Refine Labs, which is an account-based marketing and demand generation firm for high-growth B2B companies. Of course, today we're going to talk all about ABM. So what better person to have on the show? So yeah, Chris, welcome again. And if you want to add anything to that intro, yeah, feel free.
Awesome. Yeah, looking forward to diving into the topic specifically of ABM. I'll provide a little bit more context in the background. I worked in B2B companies for the first 7 years of my career as an in-house employee, covering all areas of the company: supply chain, operations, um, sale, marketing, product management, engineering. I spent a lot of time in a lot of different areas. And then in 2019, I started my first company called Refine Labs. That was basically focused on changing how companies overall run their demand generation engine. Back in the day and still present today, companies were very focused on a lead generation model where marketing is mainly focused and optimized against how many leads do we get and how much do they cost, which then leaves the SDR and the sales team sort of high and dry, talking to a bunch of people that don't buy. And the realization for the company is that when you deploy marketing investments primarily in that way, all you're doing is doing the whole company a disservice. There's tons of inefficiencies in the engine. When I think back to my career in working in manufacturing facility, it's almost like supply chain and manufacturing optimization, like Six Sigma and Lean, and you look at the process overall and you say, where are the big issues in this process? And if you have a supplier that's sending in stuff from China and 99.9% of the parts that they send you are garbage and your people are working them and then throwing it off the line and it's total waste in the system, you'd immediately flag that in your operations and say, we need to get rid of that supplier and find a better supplier. And that's all your base. That's the core insight here, is that in the beginning of the manufacturing engine, the go-to-market engine, there is a lot of waste and there's a lot of data to support the waste. And so anyway, I got a little bit further into the details of my background. That I grew Refine Labs with the help of my co-founder, business partner Megan Bowen, and the whole amazing team that we have there. To an eight-figure business in less than 3 years. We've worked with so many B2B companies, and then over the time of me working through that, what I realized is that there's a fundamental shift going on. When I started Refine Labs, it was really like we're going to help work with the CMO and the marketing team. And as go-to-market has really evolved, you have a lot of go-to-market motions running. You have partner, you have outbound, or some people will look at that as account-based outbound. You have your website, you have events, there's a product-led potentially. There's a lot of different motions that companies are running. And when you just look at them in isolation, you try to evaluate them in isolation, you like end up with a lot of interesting sort of conclusions. And so I started my second company, Passetto, on that general insight of that we need to be able to look at our data and go to market across the entire go to market in a holistic way. I see a future where the CMO, CEO, CRO, all of the core executives that are involved in go to market look at all of the same data in the same way, which just doesn't happen today. Sales is over there running their reports. Marketing has their own attribution software, and they're looking at clicks and leads and all this different stuff that the other teams aren't looking at. And I think eventually we need to roll that up so all of the executives in the company can look at the same data, just look at like they look at the P&L and make strategic decisions against it and be aligned. So that's what my new company is focused on. Dramatically different than, it's an expansion of what we started at Refine Labs, but a dramatically different entity overall. Passetto is focused on building, right now it's a tech-enabled service, but building software. We're focused across the entire go-to-market, while Refine Labs is primarily narrowly focused on the execution of digital demand. Um, And so looking forward to that expansion and the partnerships that come from both of the entities that I own and the other companies that I'm investing in, with the core objective of building an ecosystem of services and technology that serve, B2B go-to-market teams, all with highly specialized and complementary services. So that is the core objective of what I'm working on today.
I
Oh
love
my
that, and
goodness.
I love that kind of evolution. How it's like grown a new side
Yeah.
company as well, just from you getting like so involved in the way you work in and kind of really looking at what works. Um, Long time listeners to the show will know that I absolutely love an analogy. So that kind of like factory kind of work line where you're just losing most of the product, like that's really great. And you've just done your introduction. We've not even asked question one, and I've still learned something. So that's.
I was just going to say, Johnny, I think that's the best introduction we've ever had.
Mm,
I'm
Appreciate
could
sure
have
you're
that.
gone
well,
hours.
I'm
Yeah.
sure you're well versed in doing that. And kind of the first sort of point, and I know you sort of explained this already, but I don't know if you could simplify it down because a lot of people that listen will actually know the concept of account-based marketing. If you could just explain, and I know you sort of did it, but just in more simple terms, what account-based marketing actually is, what's the core of it, what's it about?
Yeah, I think there is some, you know, conflicting opinions of what account-based marketing means overall. Some opinions are, oh, it's only these like tier one accounts, and we're going to run some integrated motion, and they have to be 100K deals. Other people will look at it of like the way I look at it. In B2B, we sell to accounts. There are firmographic account criteria that qualify or disqualify a company from being a good customer for you. And so whether you're targeting a million accounts or 50 CPG brands and anything in between, you're running an account-based marketing strategy, whether you acknowledge it or not, because your sales team and your marketing team can only sell to a specific type of company or account based on typically publicly available, easy to find data. And so when you look at it in that view, that as a B2B company, if we sell to a specific type of account, which every B2B, it's business to business, every company does it, and it's very rare to see a company that can sell to anyone. Sure, there are some that have horizontal products like Zoom and others, but most are more specialized where their TAM is more finite and limited. And so when you look at it in that way, the way I look at it at ABM is more about structuring and prioritizing the accounts and the investments and the go-to-market motions that you run against those specific accounts. So some companies will have a strategic segment, the top priority reps are focused on them. They invest a lot of money. They're probably seven-figure multi-contract deals. Maybe they have strategic value where if you get that account, you're going to get 100 other accounts downstream. And so they have that prioritization. And all that does is you segment out your customer base and say, we are going to spend more money and effort and do different things to acquire this customer because it's a higher value customer for us. And then if you work down to a tier one, a tier two, and a tier three, and then in tier three, you have 500,000 accounts that are all quote unquote SMB. They might only pay you $10,000 a year at full expansion. They might not stay for very long and their NRR is low. And so we need to treat that customer and go to market in the amount that we invest to acquire that customer in an entirely different way. And so I think I like thinking about it in that way, where the tiers of customers will have specific go-to-market motions around them, typically predicated simply on the level of investment and the allowable CAC that you could sustain to acquire that customer.
So, I mean, it seems like a relatively new thing, ABM, like just from people talking about it, I suppose. But in its like infancy, it's probably been around a long time. It almost sounds like it's like segmentations, maybe like the seeds of it, or even just like, you used to get salespeople maybe sending certain companies a hamper or something. It's almost like that, but supercharged and more focused around a general kind of strategy, is it?
I mean, just to be like a lot of times that account-based marketing is framed with the technology that promoted this type of motion. But I want to remind people that account-based marketing existed long before the technology came out. I worked at a company in 2013. We had our gold, silver, and bronze accounts. They were all tagged in Salesforce. We knew every account in the US that we could sell to. It was assigned by the reps. The reps had different motions for a gold versus a bronze. And there was no technology around that. That's a basic account tiering and segmentation and like sales and go-to-market strategy. The technology that's come with it has enabled some stronger analytics, potentially ways that the teams can align better. So there are benefits to the technology overall, but account-based marketing is a go-to-market strategy. It is not a technology.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I'm glad you kind of got my clumsy question there and you answered it perfectly. Like, saw where I was kind of
It's a good
coming
question.
from. So it kind of leads nicely on to the next one, which is, and you've kind of answered this there and a little bit, but you know, Refined Labs has a very specific focus on ABM. What was it that kind of attracted you to that route, and like why does it work so well?
Yeah, and just to be clear for the listeners, I see almost entirely no distinction between the idea of demand generation and account-based marketing. In both ways, you have a target set of customers at your company, and you're going out and you're trying to create demand, capture that intent, convert the pipeline into revenue. That is the goal. And so the terminology here, sometimes people might have a distinction of like, oh, account-based marketing means something different than demand generation. I actually see them as the entire same thing when operated properly. And so what is the goal of an like account-based marketing or demand generation strategy? It is to segment the accounts that we have. If we're a developed company, we'll have segmentations of the accounts, and then go out and have a specific strategy around how are we going to create demand inside of that account, i.e., how are we going to get that account to want to buy? Not awareness, not that they know about us. How do we get them to want to buy? Then, how do we have specific motions on how, once they have intent to buy, if they're searching in Google, they're looking at review sites, they're asking questions in communities, they're on our website, they're answering our SDR's email, if they're showing intent to buy, how are we able to capture that intent and convert it into pipeline? And then lastly, once we have the pipeline, what are the things that we can do as a go-to-market team outside of just sales, running the sales process to increase the probability that we close that deal, potentially cross-sell and upsell and increase ACVs, accelerate deal cycles and close deals faster? Like, it's having a strategy across the entire customer lifecycle, which theoretically should also include account expansion post first sale. And so that generally, I think the breakdown of looking at it, it's almost like the manufacturing facility example, and just looking at your core go-to-market strategy in 4 buckets. We need to create demand. We have to, like, outside of the who's our target account, what are we going to sell, who are we going to price? We have to create demand. We have to capture intent. We have to convert pipeline, and we have to expand accounts. So just, I think breaking it into that gives some clarity about how to approach it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. And I think what's interesting, and it's kind of next question we had, which I think leads quite nicely from that, is, you know, what do companies have to consider when narrowing down their audience, you know, to implement these sort of account-based approaches? So how do you look at narrowing down? Because obviously, as you said at the beginning, you're going after specific customers, not everyone, and you're aligned on it. So how would you sort of implement that?
I think it's different per, like, by company maturity stage. So let's say like later stage company, lots of historical data. You could go back and you could look at your entire customer base. You could segment it to the top 20% LTV. You could say what is similar about all these companies. You could look at the bottom 20% LTV. You could say what is similar about these companies and come up with a data informed like ideal customer profile. If you're a $3 million run rate business that's only been in business for 15 months, you don't have that data. So it's a lot more qualitative. It's a lot more art. It's a lot more strategy. And so I think there's, based on the company maturity and the level of historical data that's available, it would be different. But those would be the 2 ways that I would consider slicing it. I always think that, you know, even if you're a big company and you have the data, that qualitative customer insights through product marketing and go-to-market strategy and other, you know, departments inside of the organization is always one of the best ways to get insights that your competitors don't see and be able to make strong decisions. So I think we need to be able to balance the historical performance data that we have in our financial software or our CRM, as well as the qualitative insights that we're hearing from customers through focus groups, surveys, qualitative customer interviews, win-loss analysis, and other things like that. And I think combining those 2 sets of data or using whatever you have available based on your stage is the best way to get there.
Yeah, and for what you said, sorry, Johnny, what you said before. So then, when you get those segments, is that when you're talking about tiering them into these ones that you focus on, like the gold ones or whatever? I know you used that analogy before, gold, silver, and bronze. But do you look at that once you segmented it, or is there certain ones you just go after and other ones you're not interested in?
I mean, ideally, you're tiering your customer based on the total like penetration opportunity at that account, right? So when we had the gold, silver, bronze, it was based on the number of beds the hospital had. Hospital
Right.
with 1,000 beds could use our machine a thousand times simultaneously. A hospital with 4 beds in the ER in some rural area could only put it on 4 patients, and we'd be lucky to get it simultaneously. And so it was based on account potential, not necessarily first sale potential. And so I think that's the ideal way to do it. In some places, like the example that I mentioned, it's much easier to quantify account potential than in others. So companies will use a surrogate measure like total employee count if you sell by seats, or a total revenue, or a variety of other like data and factors. But the goal here to tier the accounts is based on total account potential.
Okay, slight spin-off question, probably an easy one, but like, so if you're a startup or a really small company that doesn't have that data, you do see the value, I guess, in these like third-party surveys and almost like purchasing those kind of insights.
I don't think they necessarily need to be third party. I think there are some benefits, and I've seen some people talk about it recently, some VPs of marketing, that when they go out and do this type of research, they actually have a third party do it, so it becomes a more objective assessment. So I do see some benefits, but when you're a small company, you don't have a lot of resources. I don't think that you should be forced to do it that way. There's a lot of benefits in having an in-house employee run a survey to all the people in your top target accounts, which is very easy to do, to interview or put a survey on an iPad when you buy your booth at the trade show, and the 100 people that walk in, have them fill out a survey and raffle off some things so people are willing to participate. There's plenty of ways to collect data on your own as well. And at an early stage company, sometimes that's the way that you have to do it. And I don't see there are benefits to using a third party firm, but I don't think it has to be that way.
Cool. So it's very accessible, right? From almost like startups with no data right up to big global companies as well. Anyone can
And just
adopt this approach.
the core thing to realize, like, is that in 2012, I had to hire a firm, pay them $10,000 to go and find like some database to sell me a list and then by the time you're done with it, it's cost you 30 grand and 3 to 6 months to do a customer survey. And 10 years later, we can get that stuff done fast, inexpensively. It's much easier to find the data of our target customer. It's much easier to deploy a survey. It's just much easier for a marketer to have a direct, anyone in the company, but marketing specifically, to have a direct relationship with a customer and be able to collect those insights than it was, 10 or 15 years ago. So I think that's a key insight too, is that based on how the internet has changed, it has enabled a lot of things inside of specifically the marketing department that I think are great opportunities.
Yeah.
Perfect. So,
Yeah.
go on, Rob.
Because now another spin-off on that, you're just talking about like 10, 15 years ago, that's how it was. Technology's put it here. And of course, the next obvious question I was talking about, how do you feel then AI would assist you moving forward? Or do you not think there's a place for that?
I totally like the future impact of AI is undeniable. The topic or the question that I get a lot is what is going to, like, I think people are overinflating the impact it's going to have this year in 2024. I think that's the real crux of it. I think that it's already happening for like workflow automation, specifically in like the content post-production. So I see that clearly. I think there's going to be a lot of benefits. I think that it'll make producing a podcast and the downstream assets out of that podcast significantly more accessible and cost effective for companies. So I think that's a benefit. I think 2024 is going to be the year of niche LLMs. I think that'll be the main like benefit and driver here. So companies that have tons of IP or tons of learnings or tons of data or something like that are then able to custom load their LLM. And then somebody's going to go in and have a chat GPT like experience, and they're going to say, what are the right metrics that I should use to measure my LinkedIn ads? And an expert that has created the LLM specifically around that will give you the answer about how you're supposed to measure it, link you back to the source content that you're supposed to see, and be a significantly better answer in a more consistent way than searching through Google or ChatGPT. I think what people not fail to realize, but I think some people sort of miss that given the availability of information that's happened over the past 10 10 plus years via the internet. And now the amount of content creation automation that's happening through AI, your main goal as a content consumer must be to figure out what is the right thing to listen to. There's plenty of content out there, but what is the right thing to listen to? And so I think there will be a much different level of trust in the type of information. I've seen some people posting about this recently that get information from 100 different sources, and then as they go through it, realize that most of the information they get through the sources is directly conflicting. And so I think people will start to go more all in, like whether it's some people are like, yeah, I'd primarily listen to Chris Walker and go, I don't agree with all of his stuff necessarily, but I at least follow that thing because it's consistent. But perhaps companies will find different sources via an LLM that has a bunch of consistently created information. I see that happening in sales development, inside of sales, inside of marketing. There will be one for every specific discipline that just gives people the right answers faster and significantly improves like the productivity of those people. So I think that'll be what we see majorly in 2024. I think we'll begin to see the impact of AI going into SaaS tools. But I think that we're farther away than 12 months to have AI really running and making a really large impact on like the data analytics or predictive or other type of sides like that. I think that'll be further down the road. So it's more, it's clear that AI is going to have a huge impact. I think it's about clearly understanding what is the short, mid-range, and long-term impact of AI, and how am I at the right speed to capitalize on it. I think people are way far-reaching in AI to things that are going to happen in 5 years, thinking that they're going to happen in 2024.
Yeah, and we could do a whole episode on that, so I'm going to reel you back in, Rob, and take you off that track. But yeah, definitely, and I think 100% what you're saying there is like focus on this year and what actually you can implement. So good. But to take a step back and just to finish off, I guess, on the segmenting section before we move on, like, and this will depend, I guess, on the industry, the amount of companies you target in, like how much data you have. But like, how niche should you go when you're splitting up your accounts?
It's entirely dependent on the business, right? Like I work with companies that sell I don't want to give for confidentiality. I work with companies that will only sell to a Fortune 1000 company, right? For whatever reason they decide, right? And then I work with companies that have 2.2 million accounts in their Salesforce database loaded across the different tiers. And that's truly a business strategy decision. Typically, like you should select the customer and then access the data and then understand how big it is, not make the decision based on how big the TAM is.
I think that's the question. Yeah, it's like there's definitely a danger that you can just go too niche based off like you just like, this is what I want and this is all I want, right? So you've got to put a sound strategy behind that and reasoning and have that data, I guess, right?
Yeah, and you can be successful with either strategy. Both are clearly able to work. There are companies that only have 100 customers, but all those customers pay them $10 million a year. It's a good business. And then there's other companies that have 1 million customers that charge $3.99 a month. Again, like can be a good business. But what changes in that is the LTV of your customer, the CAC that you're able to spend, which then drives all of the go-to-market strategy. And so like pricing and total addressable market and then expansion and NRR potential, like all become core drivers of the reason why you would do or invest in certain things and go to market.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, so kind of slightly moving, well, no, back from that actually. I'm just going to in the involvement for the ABM strategy. Should this be led by the marketing department and include the sales, or is it a combination of the two? Who should be the driver of this sort of strategy?
I see a new position evolving that is like big companies are using called go-to-market strategy. That oftentimes is number 2 for the CMO, but has to work cross-functionally across the entire go-to-market. And a great company with a great CMO, the CMO is running go-to-market, and sales and AM are executing on that go-to-market. That's how I see it. This new role is evolving early, but it's different to run the go-to-market strategy from inside the marketing department versus having a broad view across the entire customer lifecycle that I mentioned earlier. And I think we just need to have a holistic, unified go-to-market view with somebody that's using that view to then advise the CMO, the CRO, the head of sales, operations, driving what are the right things to be doing and why. And so I see that changing. Many CMOs thought that the head of RevOps was going to be that role, and as I predicted years ago, many have found that is not the right role. Person that's the head of RevOps is typically too technical, does not see the whole field, grew up in marketing or sales, and looks at one of them primarily. And that you actually need a different skill set and a different experience for someone that's going to drive your go-to-market strategy than the person that's going to lead your RevOps department. I think some people are starting to see that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like it's almost like gonna.
I was going to say, I can imagine a lot of companies not actually taking that approach or even thinking about that and still trying to run it or lead it from a marketing or sales. But yeah, it's quite interesting having a.
Yeah,
like,
a lot of companies won't even, they won't even invest in those operational roles because it doesn't
No.
have like a direct ROI. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that evolves, definitely. So obviously you work quite closely with a lot of companies. You're very like hands-on. You've been doing ABM a long time. That's probably, I guess, in the absence of one of those roles, is one of the big challenges, right? That who's driving this, who has that full picture. What kind of other challenges have you come across with clients, and how do you kind of like overcome them?
Yeah, so just as a little note, like I've been running ABM, account-based marketing, since 2015, when you could go into Facebook and you could pick out an exact account, and you could pick out the job titles, and you could run ads to the exact people at the exact accounts for free with no technology using Facebook in 2015, 16, 17, and 18.
Mm-hmm.
And I just and using those tools and not growing up of ABM, if I have to use the technology to do ABM, I think gives me a much different perspective, because what are we trying to do in ABM? We're trying to get our target accounts to want to buy and then get them into our pipeline and close them. And so having a very content focused with paid and organic distribution focused on those target accounts to get them to want to buy, you live and die by the quality of your content and the quality of your message as a company in that way. But I digress. Like, what are the common challenges that I see inside of companies today that are most companies are trying to adopt an ABM strategy, whether they call it that or not. Number one is they continue to run their go-to-market with siloed departments. So marketing's over here doing stuff, and sales is over here doing stuff, and some SDRs are somewhere connected between those two companies, and CS is totally detached. And the siloed departments, the siloed budgeting, the siloed analytics create a lot of issues in understanding how are we going to invest, what's working and what's not, where are we going to invest, and where are we going to focus to grow the company and the business. I think that companies continue to operate in a very, I guess, assembly line style of go-to-market, where I think the ideal in the future, if you adopt ABM, is really an integrated go-to-market team, where marketing is focused on create, capture, convert, and expand. SDRs are focused on capture, sales is focused on convert, and then if you have an AM CS function, they're focused on expand. But as you see, as I called that out there, marketing should be focused across the entire customer lifecycle, and then how we evaluate the investments and the quality of those investments and the impact of those investments from marketing should be completely rethought and looked at across that entire spectrum. I think companies really lack operational excellence and data capabilities to have the right information to make good decisions. I think part of it is things that I mentioned, the siloed departments and some of those other things that downstream result in having low quality data or oftentimes conflicting data, where your SDR team is getting comped off of one object property, but then you're measuring your marketing over here with this thing, and then you try to bring all the data together to make sense of it, and none of it works because it's all conflicting, because siloed departments are measuring it. And then you're left in a question that I get asked many times by CMOs and executives of, like, do we have way too many SDRs? Or are we overspending or underspending on, digital or events or something like that? And sadly, not often, but many times the answer is, we looked at all your data and the results are inconclusive because your data sucks. And if I'm going to make a recommendation like that to a very evolved company, it's going to be a confident decision based on data. I'm not out here giving my opinion about what I think they should do anymore. And so the result of that is like the number one thing. When we finish our analysis, we've done 31 of them so far, most with companies greater than 100 million ARR. And the number one recommendation every time is your data needs to get fixed.
Sure.
And that's crazy for many developed companies that deploy $50 million or more in go-to-market investments across those departments, and don't have a comprehensive view to be able to collect that data and a strategy around how to make decisions against it. And that's the main thing that we're focused on solving at Passetto, is giving companies that exact view with that exact data where the whole go-to-market team is operating off the same analytics.
So you're almost like, obviously, because a lot of people do work in silos. So the answer then is like you hire these operational roles, so like a CRM manager or a product manager, or what you've mentioned earlier, someone specifically brought in to kind of make this kind of approach work, or work with obviously an agency like yourselves who knows how to almost like the glue between everything to bring it all together, right? So I think hopefully we'll see an evolution of that and people taking it a bit more seriously.
The manufacturing facility example is perfect in this case. At some point, you don't need any more line workers. You don't need another person to put one part together. You need to figure out how to create more efficiency. How do we like innovate over here so that we completely change our manufacturing operations? And I think that people try to solve things with, especially in like the reverse sales headcount modeling and things that happened decades ago and still happen a little bit today. It's just that people think that an indirect employee inside of the go-to-market team is an expense, not an investment. I think that operations oftentimes struggles to quote unquote demonstrate the ROI of things. But as a go-to-market like leader and team, you have to be able to understand when is the right time to hire a salesperson, when is the right time to hire an operations person to go get efficiency, when is it the right time to cut 5 marketing headcount and invest more in programs because we have too much headcount and we're overweight there. We just need to start to be able to look at the analytics and be able to make those types of decisions.
Yeah, awesome answer. Like loving all these as well. So I don't think you'll get a golden nugget at the end, Rob, but we'll see. So a couple more things before we get on to wrapping that up then. So you obviously mentioned you've done these data studies, you've worked real closely with a lot of companies. Again, I think the answer is going to be it depends. That's the answer for a lot of these. But are there any kind of standout platforms or kind of like channels that you're seeing that are quite successful with this approach? Or is it just, it depends again?
Yeah, I can talk through some of the trends that we see. There will ideally be more data so we can definitively say this with anonymized aggregated data in the future, but I'll talk through the qualitative patterns that I see. Mm-hmm. Out of a company's events budget, most of the investment goes to national and regional trade show booths and conference expenses and sponsorships. Yet a majority of the impact comes from virtual webinars that cost almost no money to deploy. Mm-hmm. And so inside of the event expenditure, there's just a huge divergence between where the money is spent and where the actual tangible results are coming from. And the only reason the money goes there is subjectively, we have to be at that show or our customers are going to think that we don't exist anymore. When the real solution is build a top-level digital strategy so your customers hear you every day, not just at that trade show once every year. But that's a trend inside the events. Webinars are typically a high-performing program, yet the investment goes mostly to conferences, which typically have less than stellar ROI on that large investment. Companies in the like digital side basically take their money and divide it between LinkedIn and Google at some percentage level, typically overweighted to Google. So a majority of the money is getting spent on paid search, all the way up to like 95% of the digital investment, down normally in the 30 to 50% range going to Google and some going to LinkedIn and content. All to run a lead gen machine with perfect attribution tracking to understand what is the ROI of these investments, or at least be able to estimate the ROI and be able to look at that either through benchmarks or just general performance metrics, to incredibly like disappointing overall results when it comes to ROI, sales productivity, sales velocity on a majority of the advertising spend, which is really focused on lead generation. Many companies are questioning the effectiveness of their outbound channel or SDRs, and the data that we see, outbound is a relatively effective channel in terms of generating pipeline and revenue. The question is are we overweight in the investment, which is typically the question that executives are asking, and typically what we see in the data is that yes, it's driving revenue. We shouldn't shut it off, but we're spending way too much money. We're spending $3 to get a dollar, or we're spending $2 to get a dollar. And those CAC paybacks worked in 2021. They don't work when you're getting 7-8x revenue multiples. Partner continues to be a solid channel for companies. I need to get more into the details about how this is being tracked and quantified to really understand the impact and the scalability of partners. But for a mature organization, partners, can deliver 20-30% of net new business from a demand capture and conversion standpoint, which I think is interesting. Basically all digital lead gen, including, like I mentioned, LinkedIn, but also things like content syndication or buying some type of internet list and doing an email outbound cold campaign or things like that, all are very generally low performing. And the hidden cost inside of that is the expenses that are needed from your sales development resources and your sales resources, the most expensive headcount in the company, doing a ton of low value activities where you are successful one time out of 100 to 1,000 times. And we need to be looking for ways to have our headcount expenditures be far more productive than that. And the data is relatively clear there. So those are some of the patterns that I see. Other patterns in terms of historical trends, like most companies are facing degrading ROI on their marketing investment right now. If you look at it over the trailing 8 quarters, you see a consistent downward slide, driven by the pressure in the economy and slowing of net new business, and the inability to correct that budget. You're always sort of trailing behind it until you can get it to turn around. So hopefully we're nearing hitting the bottom there, but that's another trend generally. Rarely in our analysis, probably 10% of the time, 3 out of 31 analysis, we've seen companies with steadily increasing marketing over ROI over the past 6 quarters.
Yeah, and a lot of that resonates, and I think definitely like some of the stuff that people should let go of, like the big events and stuff. It's like they feel like they have to be there just for that presence, and it's like no, focus on, like you say, the webinars that do truly work. And if people
I've changed my tune on this a little bit too, because I used to be the guy in 2019 that was like, fuck trade shows, go spend it all on digital, and now I have I've matured in my perspective here, and I think that it's important to clarify. I'm not saying don't go to any of the trade shows. I'm saying be way more selective about the ones that you go to and the investment levels that you have, and then, just like you do any other investment or experiment, once the event is over, actually scrutinize it. People just chalk it up in their brain of we're going to go to these conferences every single year, regardless of the ROI. And they do that. And they have certain investments that get put in that bucket, like PR and events and other things like that. And yet you want to run a $5,000 experiment on LinkedIn, and they're looking at it like it's the last $5,000 they ever had.
Yeah.
And we just need to be a lot more objective when we look between tactic and tactic. There's a subjective opinion of executives of we should do these things and we shouldn't do these things, which leads to the things they think that they shouldn't do. They scrutinize in a much different way, which leads you to not doing them, just like they wanted to. And so another part of the objective analytics system is to try to get rid of some of those things, to agree on a commonly accepted standard about how we measure the success of each of the things that we're doing, and then everyone can look at the exact same data, rather than having the marketing manager at the end of the QBR fish for everything that they can find to talk about how SEO is killing it, and you're grabbing a bunch of random metrics, putting them into a deck. I feel like that we just need to have a different. If you look at the manufacturing example again, there is entire analytics systems inside of every part of the process. If something is off track, it immediately flags it as red. Somebody's in there immediately trying to fix it. And we just don't have that in go-to-market right now. So that's what we're working toward.
Or even just like you say, just holding on to those channels where there's a big spend, and you're spending your $3 for your dollar back, but you get it down the line. It's just like, if it's not profitable, then what's the point? So no, really, really like that. And I love, as soon as you said that manufacturing analogy at the start, I love how that's just come out all the way through.
Yeah. And it is, Chris, so refreshing what you just said then about people just sticking to the same sort of the same things they do, the same shows they go to, and then as you said, scrutinise. I had to laugh when you said that because it's so true. You'll spend 30,000-50,000 here or the dollars here on a show, and yet a little test somewhere else, and they're all over it, aren't they?
For this. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, it's really good.
I've
So
been
look,
there.
yeah. So penultimate
Love it.
question, and then I'll let Rob ask you his little golden nugget. But I feel like you've already had it, mate. But we give it a go. So you've mentioned obviously, you've started ABM before there were technologies or softwares, and you have sort of alluded that people don't really need those. But let's say people are looking to go down this ABM route. Are there any good technologies, softwares people can use to sort of like help with this approach?
I mean, like, I think everybody knows the players in this space, but so I'm happy to share them. You got ZoomInfo, 6sense, and Demandbase competing for the market share. Terminus used to be in there and is literally non-existent. I was going to post that on LinkedIn the other day. It's like, what happened to Terminus? There's literally not I haven't talked to a single company that uses that product. It's just so that it's just an interesting case study because Terminus made the market for everybody else. And so just because you're first to market or you're the thought leader that drives the market doesn't mean that you win the market. And so those are the players in the space. I think that many of our customers and the companies we work with in their maturity use one of those tools. I think that the depth and the penetration of those tools is really lacking. I don't think that people use most of the value that is available inside of those tools. And I think a lot of people end up questioning whether that is actually a critical component of the marketing stack. I do believe that those tools could be a critical component of the marketing stack, but haven't seen it fully operationalized in practice in terms of how the data is flowing, how we're tracking things, how we're making decisions against those. But the things I think you really need at this point, I think that you need some way to de-anonymize accounts that are on your website and be able to know what accounts are on your website on what pages. I think that's basically first-party intent data, but then you have to layer it with account de-anonymization to then be a core trigger of, all these accounts are on our website, run it through the filters of the accounts that we want, and then deliver it to somebody to go and take action on to follow up and try and capture that intent. Which is typically an SDR, sometimes a sales resource. So I think account de-anonymization is a great tool. I think that companies that are operationally excellent and customer focused either have already or will soon implement a way to directly book a meeting with your exact rep on their website to bypass the manual follow-up process that happens with SDRs that's entirely unnecessary for a declared intent inbound lead at a qualified account that says, hey, I want to talk to your sales team. It's just totally unnecessary. So I think companies will, and there's massive gains in terms of pipeline and revenue of just fixing that. So much potential revenue leaks out because someone that is a CMO that's a perfect fit customer for your company asks for a demo and doesn't get a response from an SDR for 35 minutes, and then they go back and forth, and all of a sudden she's busy or she's thing, and you never get the meeting scheduled just because you're not operationally excellent. So I think that tool can be helpful for people. But really, to me, like the thing that is needed is a focus and a desire to have all of the data inside of Salesforce be complete, accurate, and be able to be used. It's not about new tools. It's about using the stuff that we've had for 10 years that we don't have set up properly to collect the right things and make good decisions. I think that's the number one priority, is getting the right data inside of Salesforce. And that's based on a lot of experience looking at companies' Salesforce data and just understanding how incomplete, conflicting, and inaccurate it is. To very much to my surprise, actually, I figured, especially as you move upper market, that companies would really care about that. Almost have really care. We need to be, and I've seen some companies that are like that, but they're actually rare. For the most part, I think that fixing the Salesforce data is actually the number one priority.
Data, like really powerful data, because it's not just like these people may be our customers, like people are our customers, they've bought us, we know why, we know, all those kind of reasons. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Look, I've had so much value from this already. I'm not going to ask any more questions because, there's what more is to ask. But Rob, probably will ask you for one last little golden nugget tip. He likes to do it. He's a chancer, so I'll hand across
Chris,
to Rob just to finish this off
yeah,
here.
I do. Final question. And normally, when I listen to a podcast, and I like to go away with a golden nugget from it, like a really good, insightful thing. And there's been so many on this, I feel a bit a bit bad asking another one, but just asking an actual just one golden nugget here. So if we step back and we've got a company,
whoa! You have to do drumsticks. Come on,
I thought you did, but I don't know about I drum instead.
Don't be getting shy.
Chris is such a royal guest, I wouldn't even dare do it.
You've got to do it. Come on, mate.
You don't mind, do you, Chris? We'll just
Let's
do a quick
do it.
drum roll before. Let's do it. Ready? I'm not very good at this, but let's try.
Oh, Chris, what do you rate out of 10?
It's getting there. Go back to the drawing board. A little practice.
Like a 3 then.
Oh, thanks. That's the lowest score I've ever got. Oh, well, I need to practice more. Never mind.
Right, let's finish up, Rob. We can let
finish
Chris
up.
Get back to his point.
Golden nugget tip. So, a quick tip here. Right. A company who at the moment is targeting very broadly, possibly listened to this podcast and thought, I want to refine their approach to account-based marketing. So, what's the tip for someone who's account, really broad at the minute, and they're thinking, right, I need to get into this. I need to do account-based marketing. The kind of one thing they need to do first.
Identify your top 5 to 20 customers based on lifetime value or how many, how much they refer or whatever you decide who's in the top 5 to 20. Go and talk to all of them and understand why have you been successful, what about it is, and try and pinpoint it. What is the value that you see? Go to the bottom 5 to 20 and ask the exact same questions. Then run your segmentation, use those insights, and then go out to the market and talk to people that aren't your customer that fit in those two segments and understand how they see it. And through those conversations, if you take the time, you will find the patterns. You will find the insight as to why your successful customers love you and why your unsuccessful customers are churning really fast. And you'll know it more clearly because it's typically not company size or revenue value. There's something way more underneath it. I'll give you a couple of examples. We were targeting senior living facilities, and there's actually segmentation of senior living based on the health of those people. And we spent our whole time focused on independent living because it was the largest TAM. 70% of the market and patients are in independent living. The problem is that all of our successful customers were in memory care, which is only 20% of the market. And we didn't want to only focus on memory care because then it would make our TAM way smaller and be difficult to raise money. But I did the exact process that I laid out to you. And what did I figure out? Memory care loves us because their patients have dementia and they get massive benefit from what we're selling. And people that are in independent living do not have dementia and therefore don't need what we're selling. And when you go to the independent living facilities and you see the product in the closet and not being used, and you go to these ones and you show up and every single person is using it in the common areas, like you actually see, that's why. I could give you a million different examples of that, but that process will get you the insight. It's even better if you can go to their place of business to have those types of conversations and dialogues, but I recognize that sometimes it's cost constrained, but that's how you get the insights. And there's other ones where it's been like e-commerce transaction volume or average order value or some very unique or value metric that people are using to determine whether they're going to be a good customer or not that isn't publicly available in Zoom info or something. And so I encourage people to try. And then after you get the insight, then you can try to use publicly available data and extrapolate to who would be the other customers that would fit this. And you could sort of refine the ideal customer profile, your target account list.
Wow.
Rob, happy with your nugget?
Happy as I can be. That's amazing. I would never have thought that. That's incredible. You're very generous with your information. That's a great tip. Thank you ever so much. Yeah, cheers, Chris.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, no worries. So people who've listened in, they've obviously enjoyed your insights. Definitely, if they've listened this far, where can they find you? How can they work with you? Where's the best places for that?
Yeah, you can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Chris Walker 171. Feel free to shoot me a DM if you're interested in working together. I just want to explore some of the things that I'm learning and have a conversation professional to professional. And then I publish a bunch of content so you could follow the podcast, the B2B Revenue Vitals podcast on any podcast platform or other social media channels.
Wicked. There you go. Honestly, Chris, thanks again. It's been amazing. I've definitely learned a lot. I can't wait to go and implement all that. To everyone listening, thanks very much. Leave us a 5-star, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks,
so much.
everyone.
Bye.
Cool.